Sith versus the Jedi. The light side versus the dark side. You know, every Schwartz has an upside and a downside. Well, the Force does too. And when you have Jedis versus Sith, it usually makes one of the coolest scenes in a movie, even if the rest of the movie isn't as redeemable. And when you can recreate this scene, it makes the toys that much cooler, even if the toys aren't otherwise that much redeemable. Well, thanks to the Power of the Force 2 cinema scene packs, we got a Jedi Duel and one of the coolest cinema scene packs of the entire run. And that was the final Jedi Duel, noting the trademark on Jedi. We'll get to that more before this video is over. And this set brought us 3 figures that we already had, but a little different. Well, first we had Emperor Palpatine himself, or just known as the Emperor to those of us growing up in the 80s, before he actually got a real name, or a last name. And then, of course, Darth Vader, otherwise known as Darth, before he got... No, I'm just kidding, he was always Darth Vader. And Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, friend to Captain Solo. So, when we were kids, well, this was pretty much the closest we could get, although not really, to doing the Jedi Duel. And in fact, we couldn't even do this, have a Jedi Luke versus Darth Vader, whether or not Vader's lightsaber was a little crooked. Because the Jedi Luke we got, the only one we had, was Jabba Palace Luke, which, although was very cool and we could get 2 looks, with and without the cloak, and they actually had a brown cloak without sleeves, which is correct. Took Hasbro a long time to do that. On Death Star 2, Luke is wearing a slightly different outfit. It's a different tunic. And while we did get Endor Luke in the vintage line, and if you removed the Endor cloak and belt, you could get Death Star 2 Luke in his look underneath with the glove, but the helmet was not removable. So if you wanted to, you had to swap around heads. The same thing happened in the modern line with Power of the Force 2. Our Jedi Luke was Jabba Palace Luke, and our Endor Luke, while it did have the Death Star 2 cloak underneath the rubber Endor cloak, or poncho, still unremovable helmet. So we still could not get a Jedi Death Star 2 Luke, and the less said about this Power FX figure, the better.
Is he wearing a cape?
I believe he is wearing a cape.
So, the Jedi Duel cinema scene finally gave us a Death Star 2 Luke Skywalker. Granted, he was in permanent I'm grabbing my lightsaber pose, but hey, that's pretty much what he did on Death Star 2, and the point was for this scene to recreate the duel. Getting a really good definitive Death Star 2 Luke took a long time. The first one, permanently grabbing his lightsaber. This one from the later Gold Saga series was a little odd, not just for his action feature, but he's in that weird face Hall of Fame as far as Star Wars figures. But we finally, after a few other figures of him, got a definitive one as Endor or Endor Capture Luke in the vintage line. So, yay. As for Darth Vader, well, he too was in permanently grabbing lightsaber pose. But because Darth Vader had so many figures, in fact, there's more Darth Vader action figures in the Star Wars line than any other single character. So the fact that we were now getting one in permanent holding his lightsaber pose was actually kind of a good thing, because the original version from Power of the Force 2, remember this is the modern Star Wars toys in this series, well, he was in what, in the toy industry, we called waiting for the bus pose, which is pretty obvious. It means an action figure that wasn't posed in any heroic or action-oriented stance. He was just arms to the side and legs to the side, so waiting for the bus. And the Power FX figure, at least it was a better figure than that Luke figure due to the cape, but, well, we would get a lot of Vaders. And I mean, again, a lot of Vaders. So the fact that we had one that was in permanent lightsaber holding mode really didn't matter, and eventually we would get really amazing Darth Vader figures in the vintage line, several of them in fact, so there was no sweat about that. Interesting note though that the cinema scene figure of Vader here did get a weird reuse, like what, 15 years later in the Revenge of the Sith line. He was redecoed with red all over him as lava reflection Vader, as if he was on Mustafar, I guess? I don't know. Weird figure. It was really one of those, super collectible deluxe figures they released for the line. And, yeah, why they did this? Hey, who knows? But it was an easy redeco. All right, so let's get back to this actual cinema scene pack. and the crown jewel of it, Emperor Palpatine. Now again, we'd already had an Emperor Palpatine figure, much like we already had a Luke and a Darth Vader, but like the Luke and Darth Vader, this Emperor Palpatine was a little different. The first one was in that whole waiting for the bus pose. And that's really not bad for a guy like Emperor Palpatine, because there's really only 3 things Emperor Palpatine does in Return of the Jedi. He walks around, he shoots lightning at Luke in pretty much his only action mode, and he sits in a chair. So you basically wanted Emperor Palpatine figures that could do these 3 things. Now, the lightning was handled by quite a few figures. In fact, almost every Emperor Palpatine figure since the original Power of the Force 2 one came with lightning in some form. Whether it lit up like the Power FX, whether it just snapped in place, whether it gripped over his hands, whether it shot out like an action feature, there was no shortage of Emperor Palpatines with snap-on lightning effect. But we really only had a walking Palpatine, that first figure, and then this one from the Episode 8 line, which sort of got a single card release. There were Palpatines in chairs in a lot of deluxe lines, and there were statues, and there were, super expensive versions. Even the Black Series got an Emperor Palpatine in chair. But getting Palpatine to do the thing he does in more screen time than anything else in the 3 3/4 line, well, this cinema scene basically gave us that. And it was the only Palpatine sitting in a chair we were going to have for a long, long time. And hey, if you want an old man in robes sitting in a chair, you're pretty happy with this. The next one we got actually isn't even out yet. I'm recording this in August 2021, and we're scheduled to get a vintage collection Emperor Palpatine with not just his chair, but his window, because old men with windows and chairs beats old man with chair. And hey, he even has that lightning effect. So, yeah, that's the Black Series figure, isn't it? Alright, back to this one. That's correct. So there you go. There's the packaging for Emperor's Throne Room. This isn't even out yet when I'm recording this video, so I'm still using this figure as my Emperor Palpatine in chair. And the weird, cool, frustrating thing about this was the chair was permanently attached to the base, and it was facing sort of forward along the base. Well, you could twist it. It would go in a circle, because he likes to go whee around in a circle. And this is still to this date the only figure in the entire line that I self-modified. I'm not big on customizing figures. And I actually cut the chair out of the base and then painted the bottom gray so you wouldn't see the scuff marks. Because I really like Emperor Palpatine in his chair, and he's permanently posed to be sitting in it, even with his arms with the sleeves drooping over the side. It's a really cool piece, and it really frustrated me that it was permanently part of the base. So I took some heavy-duty scissors and I actually cut it out of the base so that this is my personal collection you're looking at here. And there's Palpatine from the backside, I guess you could say. So, yeah, you really just wanted Palpatine to do those 3 things. You wanted him to walk and look threatening and, shoot lightning at Luke, and you wanted him to sit in his chair. And what can I say? This is like, to me, the chair was the coolest look because he's always the most scary. And in the vintage line, even if you found a way to kit bash Luke, you still couldn't have Palpatine in his chair because, again, walking Palpatine was the only version we got. His chair also has an interesting story, and that alone kind of makes part of this video. It's really cool how the chair shows up in the prequels as well. Well, actually really here, in his office. He's talking to the Jedi in the chair that he's one day going to threaten Luke from. And there's even been, concept designs for the chair that have floated around where Palpatine looked more like the Grim Reaper and less like the human version that we actually see in the movie. But either way, again, so iconic. And to get the chair, even if it was stuck to the base, well, yeah, I was glad, and it was really well done because it had the little controls, and it was painted. It had deco, and, for Power of the Force 2, it really stood the test of time. And the fact that it's only now being replaced in 2021, I mean, we've rarely had a figure that lasted that long that was good, if you will, that was like really a definitive good version of the figure. Except for some of the droids, like EV-99, we haven't had too many that haven't been redone. You'll also want to notice that copyright. I mentioned Final Jedi Duel. Well, originally it was Final Jedi Duel, with duel being the trademark, because Hasbro wanted to own the word duel. Lucasfilm wanted to own the word duel. I mean, it wasn't just on the front, it was on the back too. So this was kind of a packaging variant if you're all into that stuff. And you want every version. You had to hunt down the version with TM next to duel because, again, you can't own the word duel. I'm sorry, Hasbro, you just can't. It's a word. It's like run or jump. All right, well, for one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, and one of my favorite scenes in the entire trilogy, it was really cool to be able to buy it in a box. And I was glad to liberate Palpatine from his base, because even today I have his chair just sitting there right on my desk, and don't need this big Death Star 2 triangular. It's rectangular, Scott, don't you know shapes? All right, well, it was an iconic scene, and it's great to have had it both in art and now in action figure form. You know, I'm a big believer in action figures as art, and they are an expression of our love for property.